My favorite operating system is, and has been for a while, Linux. Particularly Debian-based distributions like the one we are having a look at today, Ubuntu. Many in the developer world prefer to use other operating systems like, for example, macOS or Windows. If we are using macOS, then this video will also help you there, because I believe these commands are also available in macOS, but I'm not entirely 100% sure. When it comes to Windows, perhaps the best thing you can do is simply to install the Linux command line for Windows, which I believe it's available in the Windows App Store. But important is that these 5 commands are commands that I don't see them being used very often, and perhaps you know them already, or perhaps you don't. And especially if you don't, then this video is important for you. Because these 5 commands, or these 5 different ways of using these commands, or even one of them is not even explaining how to use it, but simply just a reminder that that command exists. The idea here is that we can work better with Linux, and that we can understand better what the machine has to offer to us, and how can these 5 commands help us getting out of difficult situations, whether you are working in system administration, if you are developing software, or if you are doing any other related activity in your machine that you simply need to have better tools so that you can better understand your system, what is it doing, and how could you monitor certain things. So let's get into that. And so the first command that I want to show you today is called tldr, which in common street language is known as too long did not read. Now, if we go to our command line in Ubuntu, if you have freshly installed your distribution, or if you have not installed this command yet, you need to install it first. So the way to do that is to just call sudo apt install, and then you just say tldr. Now, I have it already installed. I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. There. So our tldr is available in the command line. If we do man tldr, so if you open the official manual of tldr, we will see that it says that it is a simplified and community-driven man pages. What this command does is it gives us the examples on how to use certain commands. So for example, if I call tldr and say, let's say a common command ls, if we do this, it will list an example of different ways of using ls. For example, the first command ls-1. If we just do that, ls-1, we will see the list of all files without the details, and we will be able to, for example, use this in pipes. If we are building some sort of bash script, or if we are building just a shell script in any way, then this can help us a lot making these kind of operations. There are other examples that it can show us. For example, old files. I think this is the better known way of using ls. We kind of automate this at some point, but there are other examples. List files with a trailing symbol to indicate type directory. This one, for example. So if we do, for example, ls-f, then we see that we've got a trailing symbol. So this is the trailing symbol. So this is an sh file. These are all files. If it is a directory, then it has a /. If it is a symbolic link, then it has an @ to it. And if it is an executable, then it has an asterisk or a star to it. So we can see here that all of these here, this SDK19, SDK20, these different executable shell scripts, they are all executable, and we can see that these are all folders. If we would do just ls, we wouldn't see that, and therefore only based on the color we would be able to see if it is a directory, or if it is an executable file, or if it is just a text file. So tldr allows us to see not the details of how the different switches work. It presents us with commands and examples of using those commands that are mostly used by developers and system administrators alike. So this is community driven, and that means that this can change because tldr also has an update function that is tldr-u, and if we do this, well, it would in theory update. I don't know exactly what is happening right now, but tldr-u would perform an update to the local cache, and that means that all of this, what we saw before with ls, so this text here could potentially change because the community maybe has added another command or removed another command. So it is entirely dependent on the community. tldr is an interesting command because I have not met anyone yet that has used this command. Funny enough, I found this command online just by making a casual search for something related with Linux, and then I came across a reference to this command, and then I ended up finding it. And that tells a lot about the awareness of this command, which I don't think it's that great, and I hope with this video that it becomes a bit more. Alright, so this was tldr. Another command that can be helpful for us in Linux is called ncdu, and ncdu is a kind of command line browser, console browser that we can use to browse through our file system. But let's first have a look at how to install it. Again, in the same way, if you don't have this installed in your Linux distribution, and most likely you don't if you haven't installed it explicitly, then what you need to do is sudo apt install ncdu, and then you will get this. And remember that these sudo apt installs will only work if you have a Debian-based distribution. We have ncdu already in our system. So if I call ncdu from this folder, we will get ncu. It's not ncu, it's ncdu. Alright, so now we've got the list of all the folders, and you can see that this is an interactive console application, and we can go all the way down and have a look at all these different files. We can also have a look at the help menu. We can see here we can go up, down, we can open a selected directory with enter, we can open the parent directory if we go to left, and we can sort, and we can also delete with D. There's also other things that we can do. We can show and hide excluded files. We can show information about selected item, and we can recalculate the current directory. Yeah, because this will load all the files into, at least all the directory structure information in memory so that we can then browse. So we might be interested in recalculating the current directory. So if I simply just go to here and I say then I have the directory information here. And then I can go and browse through all the different files and folders. Here, for example, I see the disk usage of that folder. I see the file usage. I see a lot of things that are interesting. And we can do this just simply by using the command line, which means that it is also a lightweight application because it will not use any of the typical graphic UI looking fields that usually take some time to load. They depend on a lot of different things, and in this case we just simply can browse through the system. We can also explore other things. So for example, let's say we can recalculate. So if I do R, then it will recalculate the current directory. If we, for example, toggle display of child item counts, this could be interesting. Let's see, that would be C, this one over here. So if we just say C, then we can see that there are a couple of files here. So in backup, for example, there are two files. This is the go back folder and Travis, and here we've got this one. We can also see that we get the number of files contained in folders. For example, project signer templates, we've got 28 files, and in archive we've got 75 files because they are all in Docker templates, and it counts the backward folder, the git ignore file, and the Docker templates. And then here we can go inside these folders, but we do have the count of how many files are inside these folders. We can go on to find out other interesting things. For example, we can sort, we can open the folder, we can also delete files. For example, let's say we want to delete, for example, the presets folder. We can just press D and it will ask if we want to delete the folder or not. And the same would work for files. It prompts you to delete. So essentially, this is a very complete browser system, and it's purely based on the console. So it's very lightweight, easy to use, and it can really help us if we are in a situation, for example, if the system is crashing and you cannot open any visualization window, and for some reason you are able to open the console, and perhaps here you can better browse through your system. Of course, the other argument is that we can also use the command line, simply put, to just perform ls commands, and as we have seen before, ls-f for all of the information, and or ls-1 for example, and then we can also browse through our system this way. However, for every command we are issuing, we are always getting back to the current shell, whereas if we just run ncdu, we can simply just list the folders and files, and we are always in the same shell. Another important aspect of this is, why is this called ncdu? If we do man ncdu, then we find that this is called ncurses disk usage. And it says here in the description, ncdu ncurses disk usage is a curses-based version of the well-known du and provides a fast way to see what directories are using your disk space. But what does ncurses actually means? Ncurses is a combination between new and curses. And curses is not a curse, it has nothing to do with curses, but it's a name composed out of this expression, cursor optimization. And it comes from a library that has been created for Unix-like terminals. So for example, a console. So, which are also called textual user interfaces. So text user interfaces. And this library is what's behind ncdu. And this is what gives support to this command line so that we can browse through our directory structure with this console application that works in all aspects just like a normal browser that would work with the look and feel of a pop-up window. But in this case, just through the terminal. Hence the term ncurses disk usage, ncdu. Alright, so with this ncdu, now we know how to browse through our directory structure, and we can have a manual that tells us the basic examples or the most used examples for us with tldr. In fact, let's try tldr in ncdu and see what occurs. We have different options for ncdu as well. As we can see, we can just run ncdu. This is the most used way of starting ncdu, but we can also do this. We can colorize the output, we can analyze a given directory, and we can save the results to a file if we want when we start the application, and also we can exclude files that match a certain pattern so that we don't see them while we are browsing with ncdu, which makes this a very complete command line application. In a sense, it is an application that we can use. But let's try, for example, changing the color. Let's try ncdu, let's try dark. There, now we've got something different. We've got colors now, because if you remember, if we just ran ncdu, we would just see a black and white browser. In this case, we can just say dark, and then we can see the different colors. We can see in blue the directories, I believe, and then the rest are just the file names and the different files in white. Let me see if there is something called bright here, or perhaps blue. There's no blue. Would there be a color help argument? Let's say, for example, man ncdu, and let's look for color. You can try a colored scheme, and we can see that there's dark for a color scheme intended for dark backgrounds. There are only two schemes recognized: off to disable colors, which is the default one, and then the dark for the color scheme, as we can see over here. So essentially we've got two options, one colorized and the other one without colors, which, funny enough, we can start ncdu with colors by specifying just dark. All right, so we've got ncdu, we've got tldr. The next command that I want to show you is journalctl. Journalctl is a command that is fairly forgotten. I'm not sure how many people use this command still, but journalctl gives us the logs of our system, and it is very important, especially if we are working with containers or if we are working with services in our local machine, because it will provide us with information necessary to be able to evaluate certain problems that can occur while we are running applications, where sometimes we think that our problem comes out of the code that we are developing, but sometimes it's the system itself that is hiding something that we need to know. So journalctl is a command that is fairly easy to use, but before we run it, we already know how to use tldr, so let's use that to see examples of running journalctl. So if we just run tldr and then journalctl, we will find that we've got all of these examples, and one of the first ones is show all message with priority 3 from this boot, like this. So if we run this command, we will find all errors with priority level 3, but I want to run it first without any single switch. And we can see that we've got all of the different errors, but we can also see a difference between time. Now it says here 10:01, but now it's almost 1 o'clock today, and apparently we are starting from the beginning of the logs. We want to start from the end, and for that reason we should be able to see the last lines of this logs. And to do that, we've got here already an example, journalctl -- lines, and then follow if we want to keep following the logs. So one great way to monitor our machine is simply running journalctl and then say that we want to see the last 10 lines and that we want to keep following our logs. So if we do this, we will see that we are now monitoring the system, and we see that our system is doing a lot of things. And we can see already that there are certain errors, there are things that are failing, things that are working. Call to GST discover file. Apparently something is trying to find out this MP4 file. We've got Kubernetes, we've got a lot of information here that tells us things that are happening in our machine that we are probably not even aware of. And so journalctl can help us do that. I even have here kubelet service, main process exited, code exited, status 1 failure. There are things happening in this machine that clearly need a fix, or maybe I could just ignore it for the time being. If we further look at the options of journalctl, we will find that we have this command as we have seen before, but we've got also this, show all messages by a specific unit. We also have, for example, show logs for a given unit since the last time it was started. So we can do this. For example, we can filter messages within a time range, either timestamp or placeholder. So that means that we can always go back to a certain point in time and check the logs for that specific time range. And we can also show all the message by a specific process. So for example, if we are launching a certain kind of process that could be, for example, our service or a container or anything else, we can monitor it through this journalctl with the process ID, and we can also show all message by a specific executable. So that means if we want to see everything that has happened while running a certain jar, we could use this one as well. And this makes journalctl a complete command to check the logs of things that are running in our machine. which I find very useful, and I think that if we would use this more often, we would be able to get errors and solve errors much quicker. All right, so that was journalctl. The fourth command that I want to show you, and I think that is also a very important command, is the lsb release command. The lsb release command is akin to using uname.a, and with uname.a we can get a clue on the system that we are running locally. We can see here that I'm running Linux, that this is the machine name. We've got a version here, we have the version of our Ubuntu system, and we have a lot of information, but this isn't really that readable. It kind of doesn't speak much to the user, and there may be an option like this, or perhaps if we use tldr for uname, tldr uname, then we can see that we can, for example, see something interesting about our machine. If we just simply log in the kernel name, kernel release, and the kernel version, we see this. But it's still not the best readable thing. And so for that, we can use lsb release and then say that we want all of it. Now, all of it, but all of it what? If I just run lsb release, it will say that there are no lsb modules available. What is an lsb module? Do you know what an lsb module is? An lsb module is a Linux standard-based module, which is there to ensure compatibility between different Linux distributions. If we just run lsb release, in this specific case, it will say that for my system there are no lsb modules available. But one interesting thing about this command, as I mentioned before, is that if we run lsb release with -a, we will find the complete readable information about our system, which is very user-friendly. And we've got here that the distributor ID is Ubuntu, the description is Ubuntu, and here we have the version. It also mentions that it is an LTS version, and it says the version of the release on 2 occasions, here and here. But here I have the specific .5 version, 22.04.5 version, and here I'm specifying, or at least the lsb release command is telling me that the description of this version is Ubuntu 22.04.5 LTS, but the official release version is 22.04. And it also gives me the code name of this Linux distribution, which is Jammy. So here we can see the current version of our running system. We can also check if there's anything else that this command has to offer. Let's have a look with tldr. We've got here the printout of all the available information. This is what we have just seen. And then it says print a description, usually the full name of the operating system. If we do this, it's probably more useful, especially if we want to use this in some kind of pipe construction. And we can see here the complete description of the system. We can also have here print only the operating system name, suppressing the field name, which is even more useful. So if we use -i-s, then we've got the complete name of the operating system. And perhaps if we just put this and -a, we get everything except the field names. Important to notice on this specific case is that the -s is the switch that actually suppresses the field name as for suppression. -e is different because -e has to do with the ID of the distributor. If we go and check lsb release, if we check the manual, we will see that right over here, it says that the -id will display the distributor's ID. However, when we run this command with or without -e, it will display exactly the same thing, and it will also display. Important to notice when running this command is that the -s is the actual switch that causes the suppression of the field name. The -e causes the appearance of the distributor ID, which is this Ubuntu over here. If we remove the -i, it will just say no LSB modules are available. And so that is the reason why we put here -e. But if we put -a, it doesn't really matter because it will show then everything. And so whatever we put here, -e or not -e, we will get exactly the same thing because -a will override the usage of -e. It's just a small curiosity, but it's important for us also to know about the lsb release command line. Other things that we can also test, the code name of the distribution, and we can also suppress the field names. That's also something that we can do with this command over here. If we do lsb release and then -rcs, then we should be able to get exactly the release number and the code name of the distribution, and we are suppressing the field names because we are using S. We are specifying that we only want the release number with -r, and that we just want the code name of the distribution, which is C. So for example, if I do lsb release -c, then we get only the code name of the distribution. And if we do -c-s, now I'm suppressing code name, what do you think it will show in the console? Jammy, right? There we have Jammy. Now it's time to have a look at the last suggestion that I have for you. This is using the simple ps command, and it is a way that we can have or use to get the information about the running processes that are occupying the most amount of memory. We can do this in many different ways. We can do this with top, for example, and top will tell us the memory occupation, it will tell us the CPU occupation, and it will tell us a lot of different things. But sometimes we don't want to see this graphically. Sometimes we want to use this in commands, and we want to get this information so that we can put it out in reports that are made with bash files or any kind of shell script. And so one way to do that is to use ps, but ps is a command that sometimes is complicated to use unless we know how to use it. So let's first start by doing an example. In this case, let's use ps, and let's use the typical commands that we use, and sometimes I think that we use these commands without really knowing what they do. So let's recap. If we use -a, we are saying everything. We are saying all possible information that we can use with ps, which is also called process snapshot. U in this case means user console, user friendly. So this means information that the user can read or information that the user may be interested in, like for example the own processes and for example CPU usage and that kind of thing. Finally, the X is to exclude TTY processes. The -X switch means that we don't want to have in our processes snapshot the data related to our console, to our terminal, to our TTY, which means teletypewriter. And that is an old term used for old terminals. It is still in use today, and it still comes up in manuals, and essentially that's exactly what it means. We don't want to see in our list of processes and different memory usage and CPU, we don't want to see there the information about the actual console where we are issuing this command from. Alright, but this is just the start of this. Now we get to the most interesting part, which is that we are now applying a sorting mechanism to it. And that sorting mechanism begins with --sort. And this is going to be equal to something. What do we want to have here as an information? We want the CPU usage or the memory usage. Let's pick the memory usage. And which order do we want to follow? Do we want to have an ascending order or do we want to have a descending order? Let's say we want a descending order because we want to list the processes that are occupying the most amount of memory in our computer, in our machine. So for that, what we can do here is order by memory. And first, let's give it the order where we want to, is to start by sort and then specifying the way we want to sort our records of our processes snapshot. Do we want to sort them for what? Let's say memory, and we want to list the processes that are using the most amount of memory. So we probably are interested in a descending order type of thing. So if we want a descending order by memory, this is what we should do. We add a dash to say that it is descending order. Then we add a percentage to say which field we want to use. In this case, it will be percentage mem, because it's pretty much equivalent to what we saw here with top. And then what we want to do is, now that we've got the higher memory usage processes in our list, we want to cap them to say, let's say the top 5 processes that are using the most amount of memory. And for that, we can just say head-n5. And if we use it this way, we will get a list of all of these processes, but we need to take into account that this will also list the head. So in that case, we just put 6. If we do it like this, we will get the first 5 processes, these 5, that are using the most amount of memory. And we can see it right over here in mem. This one is using 1.6 gigabytes, and that's just the simple screen recorder, which is the one I'm using to record this video actually. And then we have the JetBrains toolbox, which also uses a fair amount of memory, 1.0 gigabytes. And the other things are like Chrome. We've got the Plasma Shell, and we also have another one process that is running something related to Chrome. And so we've got all of these 5 processes. If we don't want the header, perhaps one thing that we can do is simply to revert the order, and let's just say like this. And instead of head, we can use tail. And instead of 6, now we can just use 5, because our header will not be listed in this table. So if we do that, we've got exactly the same processes. We actually have got 5 of them, and it starts right over here. And we can see that the memory usage for the simple screen recorder is still the same. It's very high, is 1.7 at this point, 1.7 gigabytes. Then we've got the JetBrains toolbox, and then we've got the Chrome, and so on. So with this small trick, we can list the processes that follow some kind of order that we want to give it in, some kind of sorting order that we want to give in, so that we can easily get the information that we are after in a way that we can also pipe this through other processes, like for example the shell, like for example a born again shell, or any other kind of shell. Even a batch process could work in Windows if we use these tricks. One important thing before I finish off this video, before I wrap up, let's find what tldr says about PS. tldr and then PS, which should be an interesting one. Here we've got all the main things that we can do with PS. One of them is just use PS without a dash. If we just use PS aux, we're going to get a huge list, just as if we were using -aux. But this is because this is Linux, and some things are just possible that way. Then we can list all the processes, including the full command string. If I launch this, and I show this example, I also want to make sure that I'm not going to get a huge log list, so I'm just going to say that I want the 5 first records, or just the 2 first records. There we go. So now we've got the header, and then we've got this detail over here. The full command string is listed over here, so it starts this is about to splash actually. The first thing that is listed when I do this is just the splash process. We can just see more processes. For example, let's just see the first 4 processes that are being listed. Some worker, some thread. These don't really have a specific command line, but we can, for example, say, let's say, not like this, but let's just say grep. And then here, let's just say that we want anything that is starting on bin, for example. I'm not sure if we'll find anything. Yeah, we find a lot of them. So we can see already here there's a lot of things being started just by the command line. And one of them is, of course, ZSH, which is the console that I'm using right now. So ZSH is one thing that I start all the time when I use the command line in Linux. So this is one of those things that I also use to make my life a little bit more easy. All right, so these were 5 different, let's call it in general, pieces of advice to use with Linux. We have seen how to use tldr. We are still using tldr at the end of this video, and throughout the video we have used it. We have seen ncdu, which allows us to browse through our directory structure. ncdu, now we know, is called new cursus disk usage command. And we also seen the journalctl, how to use it. And we have seen also two other different commands. One was the lsb release. And finally, we had a look at this particular example where we can then sort all processes that are listed with the process snapshot utility, and then we can do anything we want with it, and we can use it also in pipes throughout a shell script. Thank you for watching this video up until this point. I hope these 5 different suggestions that I've made are useful for you. If they are, make sure to let me know that in the comment section of this video. Make sure to read the description so that you know exactly what I've been talking here about and that you can access the source code and where I've put the information about these different commands and where have I been using them. Don't forget to keep participating in the quizzes because there will be always questions about command. And actually the idea of making this video came out precisely the quizzes and the passionate comments that I have been receiving on the quizzes where I make questions about Linux, Unix, and Ubuntu and other operating systems. And of course, make sure to subscribe to this channel. There are always new videos coming in, and I always make these videos with a lot of attention so that I can share something that you may learn by watching my videos. And as usual, make sure to stay tech, keep programming, be kind, and have a good one. Bye.
As a short disclaimer, I'd like to mention that I'm not associated or affiliated with any of the brands eventually shown, displayed, or mentioned in this video.